Okay, so we are going live. I don't see anybody here yet, so I'll give everybody just a little bit more time before we start our lesson. If you're tuning in if you're tuning in by recording, you go ahead and be turning to Judges chapter 8. That's where we're going to be starting. Okay, I got some people here, and uh, Elizabeth is here. Hey, Liz. I love that smiley face. Good to see you. And we got 5 people here. Very good, very good. So I'll wait just a little bit and let everybody get here because we're going to be going to Judges chapter 8 today. And Wendy's here. Hello, everybody. Hello to you, Wendy. So good. Rhonda is here. Everybody's giving me these smiley faces. I love it. Okay, very good. Good evening to you, Rhonda. It says, good evening, Rob, and good evening, Rhonda. And Elizabeth says, good to be here. Yeah, okay. All right. Let's see. We'll wait just a little bit. We do have a few more who usually come in. While we do so, I'll be turning to Judges chapter 8. And well, howdy, Patrick. How you doing, bud? And is that a little Halloween ghost? I don't know. Cute little hickey, whatever it is. All these little emojis and icons and things like that. And we'll have one or two more. We'll wait and see if some of them come in. And again, we're turning to Judges chapter 8. And we're continuing our talk about Gideon and how Gideon's life ended. Drew Zaster is here. All right. Howdy, Drew. So, again, we're just waiting just a little bit to get everybody here. And so funny because we have about 5 or 6 in the chat room and it's only showing 2 people watching, and that number goes up and down. It's gone from 2 to 5 all day, so or all not all day, all of the time period we have been here. So it does fluctuate the number of people that I see who are watching us right now. So maybe 1 or 2 more gets here. I'd like to begin. This is kind of like the feeling of when you're in the church building and like 1 or 2 people get here and then somebody else gets here and somebody else comes in and then you've got the usual crowd and then you're ready to begin. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're waiting on just a few more to be here. However, I won't wait too long before we go ahead and begin for those who are already here, who are already waiting, because I won't punish you by getting here earlier by making you wait. Punish you for getting here earlier by making you wait. That wouldn't be fair either, would it? So we have been on here now exactly 4 minutes. So I'm going to say it's going to be time to start. And when we look at Hebrews 11, where he said, time would not permit me to tell about Gideon, that's what we've been doing, is talking about Gideon. And even though we've gone to the exciting part of his conquest, the battle, the 300 men, how they defeated this huge Midianite army, plus a few others who were with them, we need to not stop there because that's not where the story ends. You know, a lot of times the stories that make it to the Sunday school literature cut short of exactly what happens. For example, in Noah and the flood, let's do a little bit of trivia where the story sometimes ends and the Bible doesn't end it, but the Sunday school literature does. What did Noah do after he got out of the ark and saw the rainbow? What did Noah do that had to do with the vineyard? So this is your first trivia question. What did Noah do that had to do with the vineyard? So let's go and let's not stop here. What did Noah do that had to do with the vineyard? So if you know the answer to that at home, turn and talk. And if you're on here on the chat, I encourage you to put it in. And I also know that some of the chat answers, people are getting to give them in different time increments. My wife is in the next room, and sometimes she will hear me through the wall give a question, and she will see an answer come on the chat box before she hears me give the question on her screen. But she'll hear me give the question through the wall here at the house. So she knows that I'm giving it. And for some reason, it does not go to her screen through her computer. And I'm in the next room, and it will have already have answers. So she will see 2 or 3 answers pop up before my question actually comes up on the screen. And she knows I've already asked it because she hears me through the wall. So I realize that sometimes I'm asking questions and people are answering them. It's just not getting here. Okay, well, that's all right. And if yours doesn't get in first, still submit it. Still try to answer it, especially if you're at home. But if you're not getting it here first on the chat box, go ahead and submit that answer and do the quickest, the best you can. 2 or 3 may come in earlier, not because they know the answer quicker, but because they have a quicker reception of this live stream. So I've also known that you can live stream, and after you're through, you can call people at their houses and hear your stuff still quote unquote live streaming, and they will still be getting you quote unquote live, and you're through and have been through for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes, and you're still going through live because the place where they are is not getting the reception as quickly as the live stream is being delivered. So it makes me wonder, whenever I do watch a live stream of someone else, how live is it? But the question that we're asking is, what did Noah do with a vineyard after the flood and after the rainbow? So I'm waiting for an answer to what Noah did after the flood, after the rainbow. So I have asked this question quite some time ago. It may be that nobody knows. So let's go, and I'm going to switch now to the screen with my scriptures on it, and we're just going to look at that. So after the flood, after Noah and the ark and the rainbow, that's such a beautiful place to end, but I'm just afraid the Bible doesn't end it there. So I'm on another screen. I have left the screen with the chat box for right now, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 9 and verse 20, and that's where I'm going to read, because it says, and Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. And then he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, he shall be to his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And may God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Now, so what did Noah do after the flood? Well, he went out and got drunk. I don't know how else we can do it. Now some answers are in. Emily is here. She says, are you talking about when he got drunk and was uncovered in his tent? Rhonda said, that is what I was wondering, when he got drunk and was uncovered. Yeah, but when does the Sunday school literature stop? Right at that beautiful rainbow. And you think, there's the beautiful end to the story. But the Bible doesn't quit there. The Bible keeps going. Also, in Sunday school literature, sometimes we don't see the whole story of David and Bathsheba. We'll stop with David as king. We'll stop, of course, we'll do the David and Goliath. That's a great story that children like to hear. And then we go to David becoming the king. We might put a little bit about Saul chasing him, thrusting a spear to him, trying to pin him to the wall, and all of that. But then we forget that David went and committed adultery with another man's wife, having Uriah killed and having Bathsheba brought to him, and all of these bad things that David did. We also don't tell the whole story on Solomon sometimes. We don't tell how Solomon uh, married so many wives that they drew his heart away from God. And of course, there's some debate as to whether he came back and whether Ecclesiastes is when he came back or whether he actually left and, died away from God. But the story doesn't stop. Now, these that I've mentioned have included the characters of the story to do something wicked, like getting drunk, committing adultery, and moving away from God. But sometimes the story just continues to go, and it's just not really that, in the eyes of a television movie, exciting, but it is the rest of the story, and it is what is going on. And so, okay, thank you, Emily, for that. Cookie's watching on TV, can't answer questions right now, and but I'm glad to have her. I mean, she and Ollie are in their living room watching us on their television. We appreciate that. But I want to look at the rest of the story with Gideon, because sometimes we have the rest of the story and it's not necessarily the good guy in the story, what we call in literature the protagonist. It is not the protagonist of the story doing something bad, but it is how he is treated later. And sometimes heroes will be heroes for a little while and then forgotten. And sometimes heroes will be heroes for a while and then there will be treated totally rude. The instance in Judges chapter 8 sheds light on just how wicked the Israelites were. And let us remember, the reason the Midianites came to the Israelites in the first place was because of the Israelites' wickedness. And the wickedness of Israel didn't just change just all of a sudden because now we've defeated the Midianites. Oh, let's be good now. And Judges chapter 8 is a testimony to that, a witness to that, that the people of Israel didn't all of a sudden just start back obeying God. They were not nearly as penitent as, say, the citizens of Nineveh were. But I want to look at Judges chapter 8. We're going to read this chapter right now. So I want to go to that screen. And there's a lot that happens after the battle with Gideon. So let's just read this chapter. And it has 35 verses, but it has a lot that goes on. So we're going to read after we are. So let's come up to where we are now. We are after the battle. We're after the 300. And we're really, I guess, kind of back to normal life, so to speak, because the excitement's over. As we hear them say, nothing to see here, move along. Let's go to chapter 8 and read what happens. And let me say one more thing on where we left off. When we last saw Gideon, they were pursuing the Midianites, and they had killed Oreb and Zeeb, who were two princes of the Midians. Now, prince as in plural of prince. And in the Bible, sometimes you see the word prince, and it literally means an official. That confused me for a while till I understood we're talking about, as we say, a prince of a man. We're talking about a mighty man, a valiant man, a man of valor. And we're talking about not necessarily the sons of a king. They can be, but it can also mean just a mighty man of the country. It can just mean an official too, talking about a prince. And so there's a change in the meaning of that word, even since the King James was translated in 1611. And looking at this, they captured two princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeeb. They killed them. And then we come to, they're going to capture, and in this chapter, we're going to see two more princes of the Midians, and their names are Zeba and Zalmunna. And Zeba and Zalmunna were also powerful kings of Midian. They are called that, the kings. And were Oreb and Zeeb their sons? I do not know. But they were powerful kings of Midian. Interesting that you would have that in the plural, kings of Midian. And you're also going to see the word Midian and Midianites here used for the Midianites, Amalekites, and all of those people of the East, that it looks like we don't talk about the Amalekites and the peoples of the East anymore. And it very well may be that the Midianites here, this term is used what we call a synecdoche, a part for the whole. We're going to call them all Midianites because that was the main bunch of them. So we're going to defeat the Midianites, even though there were a few Amalekites and people of the East with them. It looks like this is everybody now that they're chasing. Or the Amalekites and the people of the East did not just get scot-free. It looks as if they're lumped in with this term Midianites. So I'm going to read now Judges chapter 8. Now the men of Ephraim said to him, why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites? And they reprimanded him sharply. So he said to them, what have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zeba and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the leaders of Succoth said, are the hands of Zeba and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? So Gideon said, for this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zeba and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. Then he went up from there to Penuel and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So he also spoke to the men of Penuel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower. Now Zeba and Zalmunna were at Karkor, and their armies with them, about 15,000, all who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men who drew the sword had fallen. Then Gideon went up by the road of those who dwell in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and he attacked the army while the camp felt secure. When Zeba and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them, and he took the two kings of Midian, Zeba and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle and from the ascent of Heres. And he called a young man of the men of Succoth and interrogated him, and he wrote down for him the leaders of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. Then he came out to the men of Succoth and said, Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary men? And he took the elders of the city and thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. Then he tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? So they answered, As you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king. Then he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And he said to Jether, his firstborn, Rise, kill them. But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise yourself and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, both you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Then Gideon said to them, I would like to make a request of you, that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. So they answered, We will gladly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. Then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in his city, Ophrah. And all Israel played the harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and his house. Thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted their heads no more. And the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash. Now, let me stop right here. Remember, Jerubbaal was another name for Gideon. Okay, so let me read on. Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Gideon had 70 sons who were with his own offspring. Who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. Now Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now so it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals, and made Baal Berith their god. Thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in accordance with the goods he had, in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. Don't you hate how this story ends? It was going so good, and then it has to end so ugly. So let's look and let's go back and let's talk about the way the story ends. And let's just start with the first 3 verses of chapter 8 of Judges. All right. Ephraim, the mighty Ephraim who lived in the mountains and who had power, it seems, to do what they wanted to do. Ephraim, the pride that they had, the conceit, their most powerful tribe, it seems. Here they are. The inheritance in the mountains that they had preserved them from a lot of what the Midianites were doing, their expeditions that they had, and of, military expeditions coming in, taking over. And this tribe of Ephraim was where Joshua was from. Let's don't forget that. This was Joshua's family. Now, Joshua, the book before Judges, Joshua was the successor to Moses. And here we have cities of Bethel and Shiloh. I'm sure you've heard of those. And also, we have the earliest place where the tabernacle was placed here in Ephraim. So during this time, this was before Jerusalem was the capital it was. Ephraim was somewhat like the religious capital of these 12 tribes. And this was where a lot of the religious activity, of course, would have taken place. And Gideon's success just seems to mortify the pride of Ephraim because they didn't play a big part. Let me tell you something. How many people do you know who don't want to do anything if they don't have a big part in it? In other words, they're not happy working with an activity if they're not over it, if they're not in charge of it. I do know people like that. And this was the pride of Ephraim. They weren't in charge of this. And they didn't have the say so over how all of this went. Remember, even Gideon, when the angel came, Gideon said, "Look, I'm the youngest of the house of the youngest of the children of Israel. I'm a nobody." He was not of the tribe of Ephraim. And Ephraim here is just a little bit miffed that they didn't call him. Why didn't you call us to help? We're the people that should be doing this. La di da. I see that in the church today. I see that in the working world today, but I really see that in the church today. You'd expect it in the world, but in the church, sometimes we do have this. If our congregation's not involved, then it's just really not a big deal. Or if preacher so and so is not involved in it, it's not a it's not going to be successful. This was the pride of Ephraim. Why hast thou dealt thus with us? And Gideon's psychology. What does Proverbs 15:1 say? Let's take a little, let's do a little, I hate to say trivia question. Let's do a little question. What turns away wrath? Proverbs 15:1, I believe, is where we're going to want to go. Yeah, Proverbs 15:1. What turns away wrath? So I want to see some answers coming up here. What turns away? Thank you, Wendy and Rhonda. A soft answer turns away wrath. This is exactly what Gideon gave them. Now, in my background, I guess you can hear that there are several sirens coming, and my dogs, as usual, my dogs are howling because every time a siren comes, they go to baying and howling and going crazy. That's what happens when you have a beagle and a Labrador and a border collie. They just love to howl. So I apologize for that. Anyway, Elizabeth has got it. Rhonda's got it. Wendy's got this answer, which is a soft answer turns away wrath. And not only does Gideon use a soft answer, but he uses a bit of psychology, a little bit of flattery, a little bit of I don't know how to say it, an ingenious answer. And here's what he says to them. What have I done now in comparison with you? In other words, how can this little thing that I have done be anything in comparison to all of the good that you have done? Look at all what you have done. What I've done now, oh, that's nothing compared to the good things that you have done. And then he says, is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? Now, looking looking at this, sometimes my dad told me that sometimes if you want to get a good commentary on a Bible verse, just simply to look at another version of the Bible and see how other translators have translated it. And I'm going to look at some translations on what Gideon answered this with. And the one of them, the what I have here is a list of this, the Amplified Bible. And I'm not, let me say this, I am not endorsing all of these translations. I'm just saying this is these translations translation of this verse, but it does give us a fuller meaning. Some translations are word for word. Some translations are what you call thought for thought. In other words, they may paraphrase a little, then they're trying to get the thought out there. That's dangerous because you really, and some are kind of a mixture of both. But the Amplified Bible says, what have I done now that is so significant in comparison with you? It's not the gleaning, and then in parentheses, leftovers of the grapes of your tribe of Ephraim, better than the vintage entire harvest of my clan of Abiezer. That is a clear way of putting it. The leftovers you have are better than our whole harvest here. Now, I did not interpret it personally when I read it from the New King James that way. And now we're not saying that Rob's interpretation, is the one we go by. I was thinking he was talking about the new grapes versus older wine that they had, but it could be very well that the language more means that the leftovers versus the whole harvest is what he's comparing here. But I want to look at some more uh, in this. And so let me go down to the CJB, or the Complete Jewish Bible. And it says, he answered by saying to them, how can what I have done be compared with what you have done? Aren't the grapes Ephraim leaves on the vines better than the ones Abiezer harvests? That gives it a clear meaning too. You see what he's saying. Oh no, I'm just a little guy. Look at all this good you've done. Why are you angry at me when you look at all the good you've done? Why, your grapes you leave on the vine are better than what we have to harvest down here where we live. Now, another version translates that, and this is the contemporary English version, and it is more of a thought for thought, but the thought is here. Gideon answered, don't be upset. Even though you came later, you were able to do much more than I did. It's just like the grape harvest. The grapes your tribe doesn't even bother to pick are better than the best grapes my family can grow. That's putting it in plain English, isn't it? Even though you came later, you were able to do much more than I did. And here again is a thought for thought, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, on the contemporary English. But let's look at the easy to read version. I see this one a lot, and I see children having this one a lot. But that's called the ERV. It says, but Gideon answered the men of Ephraim, I have not done as well as you. You people of Ephraim have a much better harvest than my family, the Abiezers. At the harvest time, you leave more grapes in the vineyard than my family gathers. Isn't that true? That could have been very well, because, when you translate from one language to the other, you do lose several things. And so there's the gist, though, in all of these, of what he's saying. Look, I'm not good as you. The grapes that y'all leave are better than the grapes we grow and harvest and work hard to get. So anyway, basically, yeah, I didn't let you do that, but who am I to let you do that? What difference does it make? Y'all are so much better than me, it doesn't matter. And look at what happened. And I'm back now in the New King James Version. Uh, I'm going to go to verse 3. God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Now look at the result of this. Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. Way to go, Gideon. What a way to answer. You know, a soft answer turns away wrath. Doesn't always mean I'm just going to sit here and let someone browbeat me with the words they use. It can mean I can use psychology of the mind and use kind words to get and hear. I don't know what to call it, but what we call today flattery. I know that's a little different than the flattery used in the Bible, where it has an intent of harm sometimes. But this answer is just ingenious. I just love Gideon's answer to that. So I do want to spend some time on that and show you some different versions, translation of that. So let's go on to verse 4. The war's not over, because now there are two more that they're hunting for: Zeba and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. Zeba and Zalmunna. These kings, and it's very interesting. You see these kings of Midian, were they brothers? Did they divide the kingdom in half? Did they rule together? I do not know. Uh, these two leaders were of these groups of people that were uh, living away from them, like across the Jordan from them, I guess. And here are these two kings that we only see here. Don't know much about them. So the trouble when you go to looking at commentaries on some of Judges chapter 8 is how many different answers and how many different ideas they are as to who these kings are and exactly what happened with a lot of the instances in Judges chapter 8, to the extent that I just wanted to look at the scripture itself. Uh, I do like, yeah, a lot of y'all know I quote a lot from the Kaufman commentary. I'm using his, for my lesson tonight. But you look in the Kaufman commentary, and he quotes a lot of other commentaries. And that's what a lot of people don't like about Kaufman. Is what I do like about Kaufman, because he pulls out a lot of different commentaries, ideas on different verses. And you can see on this Judges chapter 8, there's a lot of different ideas as to what happened, and some of them to the extent of disagreeing with what the Bible says on it. Whenever you read a Bible commentary, remember you take the Bible first, and the more you study, the more you can see where a commentator gets off the wall a little bit. And when a commentator says something to the effect of these men may have been uh, someone else, or this may not really mean these people, but it may be a figurative sense of something. You really got to use common sense. And remember, Samuel was the one, by the way, who wrote the book of Judges. And Samuel was inspired. As far as we know, this is the one that, as far as we best we can tell, wrote this book. And he would have been inspired, and he would have gotten these names correctly. But it's so much easier sometimes just to look at what the Bible says and say, okay, that's what the Bible says on it, than it is to try to explain away and say that these two people didn't really exist, or these two people are figurative of the whole tribe, or just some nonsense translation of it. Uh, Looking at this, one commentator said that the word Ziba meant victim, and the word Zalmunna meant protection refused. And what if that does mean that? Well, that could just be their names. They named people because of different reasonings, because of different things that happen in the child's life, and sometimes names were changed. And you know that that could be that was these men's real names. Why couldn't it be? It really upsets me when you see people who are supposed to be Bible scholars and they don't believe the Bible. And this was Zeba and Zalmunna. It's just one of those areas. Now, another place where they want to say, oh, that doesn't mean exactly what he said it meant, is where he said, I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness. And people say, well, I just don't know what that means. That's very uncertain. Well, why couldn't he tear their flesh with the thorns of the wilderness? It certainly was a type of punishment that was used in ancient times. Things that what we call today barbaric were certainly done. Why wouldn't he? Why couldn't he tear their flesh with the thorns of the wilderness? Why couldn't he go and get some and do what he said he would do and tear their flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and briars? As he said down in verse 16, he took the elders of the city and thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. I cannot read that without laughing, because the way it says he taught, that's kind of a slang word today. Oh, you just got taught, or I'm going to teach him a lesson. That's this old, guys. That's this old. He taught them, to the other men of Succoth, and taught the men there. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to teach you a lesson. And I grin when I read this. He taught the men of Succoth. You've been taught. There's another phrase. You've been schooled, but he just got schooled. When someone is overpowered by another person, or maybe it's a sports team overpowered another sports team or something, they got schooled, they got taught. I taught them. We taught them a lesson. I believe that's the meaning of the language used here. But looking at this, I don't know what else it could mean down here in verse 16 when he comes back and does this that he promised to do. I don't know any other interpretation than he took them and he took briars, he took thorns, and somehow killed them with it. Maybe he whipped them to death, or his men whipped them to death with it. Maybe he laid them down and drug thorns and briars over their bodies. I I don't know exactly how it was done, but this type of cruel punishment was not unknown in this time. In fact, let's go to another verse. Let's go to the book of Amos. Let's leave Judges 8 just a little bit, and let's go to Amos. And I want to go to Amos chapter 1, and you look at, I want to look at verse 3. Let's go to the book of Amos, chapter 1, and verse 3 on what Gideon did here. So let me start at 1. Let me start at 1 and 1 and go all the way to 3. Amos 1, 1 through 3. The words of Amos, who were among the sheep breeders of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, the Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The pastures of the shepherds mourn, and the top of Carmel withers. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4 I will not turn away its punishment. because they have threshed Gilead with implements of iron. Now, let's look at this. They have threshed Gilead with implements of iron. A very similar saying in uh, punishment to I'm going to thresh you with briars of the wilderness. I'm going to I'm going to, and we say the word actually thrash. There's that word, and I don't know the exact etymology of it or the meaning, background of that word, but we have the word threshed and thrashed. Uh, Whipped. A thrashing is a good whipping. Can be read here. He thrashed them with briars, whipped them with it. Here in Amos 1 and 3, they were over the threshold. They have been threshed with implements of iron. In other words, thrashed or whipped with implements of iron whipping sticks of some kind. So this type of thing was not unknown in this day and time, this ancient world, that they would do things like this. Uh, some have even said that the word briars may mean threshing sledges, something to whip with, but I, I don't see why it can't just mean exactly what it said. Why can't he take briars, whip them with it till they die? I believe he certainly was angry enough, because look at what happened here. He just defeated the Midianites with 300 people. They're hungry. They go to these men of Succoth and they ask for bread. And he tell them why. We're pursuing these kings. And the men of Succoth answer is, oh, do you have them in your hand already? And we're going to give you bread. In other words, we don't trust you. We don't believe you can go get them. They've just defeated all of the army. They're chasing them. Zebah and Zalmunna are not chasing Gideon. Gideon is chasing Zebah and Zalmunna. And the leaders of Succoth and their arrogance, they say, oh, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand? But we should give bread to your army. Kind of remind you of Nabal and Abigail when David asked for food and he wouldn't give it to him. Nabal, whose main name meant fool, and Abigail basically said, yeah, he's just like his name. He is a fool. And now we're not supposed to call people a fool, but now Abigail did, and that was before Jesus said that. But here are these men who are not going to give these hungry soldiers who are fighting for their own country. Now, could you imagine if we were at war? And I know that the Constitution forbids the quarterment of soldiers, and that was a big thing in the Revolutionary War because the British were making people house and feed their soldiers, and we're free from that. But could you imagine if they asked? They're not demanding quartership like here in what's going on in the Revolutionary War, but they're saying, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me. They are exhausted. And I'm pursuing these kings who, you can, the king can go back there and raise up his own army again. We need to get them. And they refuse. Could you imagine if we were at war and our own countrymen came and asked for bread and somebody said, well, you've not won yet. I'm not going to give you bread. You go win, then I'll feed you. Really? Really? Now, Gideon's answer to them, okay, because you said this or for this cause. When? Now look at verse 7. This is why Gideon is in Hebrews 11 as being one of the faithful. Not if the Lord has delivered them into my hand. What did he say? He said, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then, not maybe, but then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And so he goes to another place, Peniel. And they answer him just like Succoth does. All right, when I come back, I'm going to tear down this tower. Now, we don't know exactly what this tower is, but it was something that they either looked at as a military protection, or they either looked at it as some sort of landmark in their town, and they liked this tower, or he wouldn't have threatened to tear it down. It was something significant to them, and he's going to tear down or break down this tower. And whatever it was important to them for military or aesthetic reasons. And so he said, okay, you love this tower, whatever it is. When I come back, it's gone. I will do it. I love his faith. I love this is not a positive attitude, y'all. This is more than a positive attitude. This is faith. This is his faith in God. So, you look at this faith that they had, that he had, and his followers as he's leading them, and they're looking to him for bread. And Gideon is, we overlook Gideon as a good leader. Moses was a good leader. Oh, yes. Joshua, a good leader. Oh, yes. Gideon is over here trying to get bread for his people. A lot like Jonathan was trying to get honey for his men when his father made that ridiculous rule to not even eat anything. Jonathan was a better leader than Saul, but Gideon is looking for food for his people, and it angers him so much that his men can't be fed, that he's going, we're going to break this tower down. When I come back in peace, I won't be coming back in war being chased by an army. I won't come back. It's going to be peaceful times, but not for right around this tower, because it's going to be torn down. So the scene then changes in verse 10 to the actual chase of Zebah and Zalmunna there at Karkor. They have about 15,000. Everybody that's left, look at this, 120,000 had fallen. And so Gideon goes up here, and verse 11 is a very important verse we can apply things to today. He attacked the army while the camp felt secure. Isn't that when the devil attacks us, when we feel secure? You could make a whole lesson, and in studying this, I thought, I need to do a sermon on that. While the camp felt secure. So if you see that, you'll see what verse I got it from. And he goes up, and while the camp feels secure, he attacks it. And Zebah and Zalmunna flee. Now, this is the difference between their leadership and Gideon's. And this is the difference between the faith they had in their idol God and Gideon had in the real God. Because they're attacked, it's every man for themselves. Gideon's men are hungry. Gideon stands by his men. And Gideon pursues them. And he captures them. And he routs the whole army. He captures them. And of course, you get the leader, and many times the army will disperse. But he comes back from the battle, and this place called the Ascent of Heres. And this man of Succoth somehow is, I don't know, wandering around somewhere. They catch him. They bring him in, and he tells him to give him the names of these leaders of Succoth. Apparently Gideon didn't know it. He needed their names. So he writes down for them who the leaders are. Who is the force behind this terrible decision that they have made not to help these men of Gideon. He wants the leaders' names and the 77 men. Now, this young man, being overpowered, he does this. And so he goes to Succoth. He has Zebah and Zalmunna with him. And he said, here they are. This is the ones that you said are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand. Okay, here they are. You wouldn't give bread to my weary men. In verse 16, he takes them and he teaches them a lesson. He kills them there. He goes to the Tower of Peniel and he tears down the tower and kills the men of the city. Now, that could very well be the leading men of the city, could very well be all the men of the city. They should have helped him. He had God on his side. How unpatriotic they were. Now, when all that's over, we turn our attention, because you wonder what Zebah and Zalmunna are thinking of this. I have to wonder, because they're seeing Gideon destroy 2 cities, and now it's their turn. Now it's your turn. Let's talk about you now. What kind of men were they that you killed at Tabor? And here we see some insincere flattery, it looks like. Oh, as you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king. Well, sweet as that may have attempted to have been, he says, you know what? Those were my brothers. And look at this. We're not just talking about here brothers as in a brotherhood or a nationwide citizenry. He said, those were my brothers, the sons of my mother. You killed them. And as the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And so he has his firstborn here, who's a very young child. And he says, go get him. And I don't know why and what possessed him to seek his. Maybe it was that he was going to say, my little child killed them. I don't know his intentions there. But he says to Jethro, rise and kill him. Jethro's still a youth. He wouldn't draw a sword. He was afraid. He may have been afraid that these 2 kings who were men of war would kill him. We don't see a punishment for them, for Jethro. Might not have been the smartest thing, could have been what Gideon said on a whim. I don't know. But it sure brings out the smart mouth in Zebah and Zalmunna, because they say, rise yourself and kill us. As a man is, so is his strength. Now, we're talking smack. And we're the ones in bondage fixing to be killed. And they just can't keep their mouth shut. They're trash talking. And they're about to be killed. And that did it. And Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna. Now, that was a foolish thing for them to say, but some people can't keep their mouth shut even when they're at death's point. And Zebah and Zalmunna seem to be this type of arrogant, proud, smart-mouthed person. And they get killed. Okay, well, it don't matter to me, just so you dead. So Gideon gets up and kills them. And it says they took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Very possible he let them ride their camels. And these ornaments were gold. I don't know why they decorated their camels' necks. It might have been just a show, these were the king's camels. And Gideon gets it. Now, in the rest of the chapter, we have 2 things happening. They want to make Gideon king, and then we see the death of Gideon. Them wanting to make Gideon king was really a slap in the face of God. You have delivered us from the hand of Midian, verse 22. And so they want him to rule over, and your grandson, and your son, and your grandson. Now, while that would be a compliment, yes, Gideon sees it for what it is. He says, no, I'm not going to, nor is my son. The Lord shall rule over you. but he does have a request, and he wants payment for what he did. And he has a very ingenious way, and I guess I use that word a lot, don't I? But he's just such a smart person, Gideon. He's one person, you think of people you want to meet when you get to glory, and Gideon's one of them. Because I guess my question to him would be, what made you think about earrings out of all the things there? He said, I do have a request of you that each of you give me the earrings from his plunder. Now, that would be, I guess, a small price to pay because there would have been so much gold. Think of how big earrings would be compared to, say, necklaces and uh, cuffs for your arm, bracelets, and things like that, and coins, whatever they may have. And so they gladly do this. So it says they had golden earrings, for they were Ishmaelites. This must have been some identification mark of them. And so they spread out this garment, and everybody puts the earrings there. And here we have 1,700 shekels of gold in this. It was very smart to do it. 1,700 shekels of gold in this. So that is not counting those. That is not counting those crescent gold things that he got off of the camels and all. So what you're looking at is a lot plus what he would have in his other the booty that he got, that would be from his war, the prizes that he got. So he really came out with very good payment for this. And 1,700 shekels of gold. Then we have pendants, we have purple robes, we have chains that were around their camel's neck, in addition to these crescents. That might have been a crescent on a chain. And he takes all this, he makes it into an ephod, and he sets it up in his city. This turned out to be a mistake because they started playing the harlot there. Uh, and that could be very figurative and very literal both together. That is, that they would have turned their back on God and gone into idols. And sometimes these idol worshiping ceremonies had harlotry in them, prostitution, harlotry, sexual sins. And look at this, it became a snare to Gideon and to his house. He might not should have done that. He might should have just lived off of that gold, or spent it for the food, the things that he needed. But we don't see Midian anymore after this. Verse 28 says they lifted their heads no more. The Midianites were subdued. It took all of this to get them that way. And the end of the chapter has his peaceful ending. 70 sons. Now, if you look at the judges, you're going to see that a lot of them had a lot of sons. Okay. Now, he had 70 sons. Now, he had many wives. Okay. He had many wives. And he had, we talked about the gold in the ephod. Doesn't say he used all the gold for that. It says he just used some of it for that. So he would have to have, for such a large family, a bit of sustenance there, a bit of wealth just to feed them. But Jair, Jair, one of the judges, Judges 10 verse 4 says he had 30 sons. Ibzan, in Judges 12 verse 9, had 30 sons and 30 daughters. Abdon, Judges 12 verse 14, had 40 sons. And so you see these judges having a lot of sons. Doesn't mean the polygamy that they used to get those sons was accepted. It was institutions of the day, and not only that, the concubines that they would have had, that was just institutions of the day. And we see here in Gideon's family, after Gideon died, when you go to chapter 9, if I'm not mistaken, you'll see some of his family doing evil. I believe we have Abimelech, and uh, Abimelech is not in the Hall of Fame of the faithful. Abimelech, technically, we talk about Saul being the first king. Abimelech was really the first king, but it seems as if some of Gideon's family was in on what all was going on in chapter 9. Uh, Definitely, there is no. Of course, Abimelech is Gideon's son to start with, but we see the wickedness that they have. And while Gideon did not accept the position of kingship, Abimelech made himself the king. And we call Abimelech a judge, and some people won't add him with that group because Abimelech wanted to be king. Before ever there was King Saul, there was Abimelech. And that story I'm going to let you read in Judges chapter 9. It is interesting to me, it is at least. But looking at this, he have we have his wives, we have his concubine, and Gideon dies at a good old age. We're not given his age, isn't that interesting? But he was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father. The only sepulcher we see mentioned, I read somewhere, I believe it was Brother Kaufman's commentary. This is the only time we see a sepulcher mentioned in the book of Judges, is this tomb of Joash, his father, in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. And so we have his life ending. What a legend, what a legacy. For thousands of years to come, the name Gideon means something. Now, after he died, they got to worshiping Baal again. They made Baal Bereth their god. They played the harlot with the Baals. And look at that. Here's gratitude for you. Verse 34, thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. Didn't remember him. Just like the king who did not remember Joseph in Egypt. Verse 35, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal Gideon in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. They just forgot and were soon to forget the good that people do. That's why you got to keep doing good, because people are going to forget. People are going to forget the good you do. If you want to be remembered for doing good, you better keep doing good. But even after you're dead, the good that you do many times is forgotten. Just like Gideon, what he did was forgotten. Just like Joseph, what he did was forgotten. Many times we forget the good and remember the bad. Well, the good here was definitely forgotten. They didn't show kindness to his house for all the good he had done for Israel. It didn't matter to Gideon, though. Gideon's in the Hall of Fame of the faithful. And here we end our lesson on Gideon. And you can read about his son, Abimelech, Gideon, Abimelech, when you talk about the judges. But this, so much has gone on with Gideon that the writers of Hebrews says that time would not permit me, time would fail me to tell of Gideon. Now, the next person we want to look at next week is Barak. So next week, let's come back at this same channel and look at Barak and look at his story, because time would not permit the Hebrews writer to tell us. We're going to go, and if God allows us, we are going to have the time, and we're going to look at Barak. So I want to say thank you to everybody for listening. And I'm going to read a few of the comments on the soft answer turns away wrath. Elizabeth Kellum says, old saying, kill them with kindness. And Drew says, I don't hear that very often, like almost never. That's because people almost never do it. And Elizabeth says, what I wrote, Drew, when Elizabeth said, when we are too comfortable, I'm going to guess that's when the camp was secure, too, when we are too comfortable. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something about Gideon that you can use in your life, something you didn't know about Gideon. He's just a fantastic person. I read these stories and I think I want to meet him when I get to heaven. A little bit. Yes. Okay. That's why I was figuring Liz. Yeah. I want to meet him when I get to heaven. You know, you read these stories, and he's in the Hall of Fame of the Faithful. And I don't know. I don't know what I'd say. Probably something to embarrass myself the way I usually do things, but maybe not in heaven. Maybe not in heaven. Things won't be like that. So, anyway, thank you for tuning in with us. And we're going to meet again on Sunday morning at 11 for our next worship service. If you are in the Bible Bowl, I need you to hear this announcement. Go to our group me. I have screencasted 4 videos because screencast only lets you do them less than 15 minutes. So you have to quit right at 14 minutes and, up to, 58 seconds. So about 14-minute long, 3 that are 14 plus minutes and 1 4 or 5 minutes long of studying for the Bible Bow study. If you are in Bible Bow, I will not be meeting with you on Google Meet tomorrow. I'm going into work tomorrow at teaching my night classes, so I screencasted a Bible study because Sunday is the Bible Bowl. Now, I believe if you will go to GroupMe and pull up these videos, I suggest you do it tomorrow like we usually did, but you can do it over and over again because they are recorded. And I'm hoping that GroupMe properly showed the screencast videos. I learned to do the screencast at school because that's how we're teaching our classes. And one of the first things I said to myself was, this will be used somehow with my ministry. And that's what we're doing the Bible Bowl study for. So I want every Bible Bowl member to look at the Screencast-O-Matic videos that I put on the Dovertown Youth Group page of GroupMe. Now, we will come back again at this channel, Lord willing, Sunday at 2 o'clock, and we'll do our Sunday afternoon service there. So thank you, everybody, for joining in. I love you all very much. And having said that, may God bless you richly, and you have a good night and a good rest of the week.